Hello and welcome, especially welcome to our live viewers. Let us know in chat if you're here with us. Adrian.
Hello, everyone.
So today last week we just finished up the topic about domain-driven design, and this week we're going into a new topic for the next few weeks about engineering culture. So we'll be talking a lot about the habits, the tactical side, and also the incentives, the leadership styles that make or break tech teams, engineering teams, product engineering teams. And with me today is Adrian, who is an outspoken expert and very much a loud voice recently on pull requests and lean procedures and needless rituals and needless, how would you say, um, ceremony around certain activities which may or may not be productivity oriented. Adrian, why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers?
First of all, thank you very much for having me today. I was really looking forward for this one because this is exactly the topic, as you said already, which I'm talking about lately. So actually, not lately, it's quite a while now. And let's say I call it tech culture, you call it engineering culture. But in my opinion, this is the very foundation of every organization where humans are involved in. So even if we talk about tech and AI and all this kind of stuff, everything depends on if our organization is working on the cultural level. So this is basically the fact. So why is this my topic? So I'm basically a small to medium-sized business CTO for now 15 years. I'm software developer since 24 years now. And I saw a lot, and especially in the first years of my professional being, I was solely focused on tech and solving problems. So I think most developers out there know that. So you have your problems there. You have your pressure from outside. The business side is doing pressure, colleagues, your supervisors, all this kind of stuff, and you need to get things done. You are in this tunnel. You just tunnel through your day.
Mm-hmm.
But on some point, as the older you get, on some point you realize that, as I said before, it's more to that than just that. So you basically don't get out of your problems if you don't have a beneficial culture of learning where everyone is actually helping each other to get out of these problems and all this kind of stuff. And as I grew into more responsibility in the last 15 years, step by step, especially in the last 5 years, I realized that I could have solved most problems in the past with focusing more on the cultural aspects, on the human aspects, on the human basics of our culture. So in my opinion, especially for all the CTOs out there, you have a tech in your name, but you are responsible for the tech culture as well. So I would listen to this one. Might be some interesting stuff for you. It will be controversial, so be kind to us. But it's based on experience. It's not just an idea we have. So we want to talk about this today. Thank you very much.
So you touched upon a lot of things. So who is this not for? So you said organization and collaboration. There was a lot of learning, a lot of collaboration, a lot of helping. So if you're a soloist, this does not apply to solo engineers, like somebody working solo. Does that still apply? Would somebody working solo do pull requests? Would somebody working solo do?
Yes. So when it comes to pull requests, maybe, yes, it is not necessary, but the cultural aspects, the general ideas behind that, when we come to things like maturity, responsibility, you work solo, but you work for someone or with someone outside of your.
So there is always if you're not if you're not a solopreneur and there is a stakeholder involved, so 1+ is already, you're in. Like there's no way around what we're going to talk about today if it's like 1+.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's agree on that.
Okay, so I just want to frame our discussion today a little bit. And you mentioned small, medium businesses. So that's mostly my area of expertise and experience as well. So to our viewers, hello, Feng. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Hello, welcome. So we are gonna answer your questions as they come in. If you have a question to me, to Adrian, Adrian is also very much versed in things like cloud setup at DigitalOcean and also setting up engineering culture. So if you have any questions related to that, or pull requests, or engineering in general, or monotasking, which will be our last topic, let us know immediately and we'll address it immediately as much as we can. Most of the meat happens in the first half of our session today, and we have 90 minutes, and we'll stop at the 90-minute mark today. So what we're going to talk about today, there's 3 topics on the agenda, and we'll focus on the first 2. The first being, what does good, healthy engineering culture look like? Because it seems like there's a lot of stuff in the books and a lot of stuff on the internet and on YouTube, and a lot of advice that is being sold as standard practice is actually bad advice, or it might be very circumstantial and sort of have to still think and scrutinize what is being sold to you, especially with the whole certifications going on and SAFe and similar. Second topic will be focusing on pull requests. Some ceremony, whether it's necessary, not necessary, alternatives, when it's good, when it's bad, and why you should usually avoid it if you can. So that's the main 2 topics. The third topic will be specifically about monotasking. So it is a very, very sort of agile, lean way of thinking about collaboration in a team. And monotasking you can think of as being the opposite of a feature factory. Feature factory being 7 people working on 7 things. Monotasking is everybody's working on one thing. Right? So that we are exploring that spectrum if we have the time for it. So everybody who's with us live, let us know you're here. And Adrian, let's start off the first topic. What does good head? How did you find out what works and what doesn't work for engineering culture? Like, where do you go when you're in when you have an unanswered question?
So you mean when I need to learn, when I need to get some solution for my problems?
Yes.
Okay. A good question to start with. So there are endless possibilities to do that. But I think the key is to find the possibilities which actually bring you forward and not add other problems to you. So we all know things like Stack Overflow. If you have technical problems, you always get some idea there about how others solved a mostly similar problem. You need to transfer this to something, and then you have AI today where you can ask questions and you hope you get something which is actually real. And there are what I basically prefer is to not do that at the moment when you really need help. So first of all, we are software developers, which first of all implies that we are not programmers. So we are not doing just technical stuff. We are developing software, which means we need to obtain and learn some software skills as well. And this is this idea of being an eternal learner, the continuous learning idea, all this kind of stuff. So if you have a problems in 2 weeks, you should have today laid the foundation to find a solution for that already. So this is what I would put in first. So first of all, you need to develop a behavior of learning and the understanding why you should learn. So always understand first before you actually do. And then you can, with that, you build up step by step this broad variety of things you know already, and those will help you find the right spot. So there is no single platform which will help you. Of course, you can ask a question somewhere on some social media platform or something like that. The problem is, or that the chances that people will ask the question or will answer the question with a product they have or a service product they have, and they will sell it to you as the best, because 10 others do that at the same time. At the moment, it's a trend, and they sell it to you as the best solution. But it may not be the best solution for you. You need to understand first that you have your requirements, your qualities or non-functional requirements, and your special context. The context is somewhat important to understand that your context is unique out there. No one else has exactly the same context. So in order to be prepared for your own context, you need to learn step by step, but continuously to act on this context to solve problems, because there will not be only one problems. You will be, problems will be fired at you, and you need to be, if you want to grow, your problems grow with you. And in my opinion, it's basically the continuous way of doing that. staying on top of your game, and then you actually know what you do. There is no specific thing out there. What a good thing is, I have that actually myself, is to have a buddy. To have one or two buddies you communicate regular with, you tell them stuff, you talk with them about things. And this is just, they know about your problems, they know about your context. And if you ask a question to them, it is more likely that they give you a genuine answer and a good answer, or a hint what you can actually do. So I hope that they answered the question.
I like this last point that you just brought up about this idea of a buddy, because a lot of times when I'm coaching teams and leaders, usually it's the leader doing the buying decision, and I can see that there's a hint of they're also buying it for themselves, right? Because the CTO space, like any kind of top tactical and top strategy position, even if it's C-level or if it's just a CTO title in a startup and it's really just a founding engineer or a VPE, these positions are generally unique in companies, and there's no other peer that you could learn from or collaborate with or be mentored by, right? So it's a very lonely position. It can also happen with product positions where you might have one product owner and that's it. They have no reports, they have no structure. They just do their one thing, and they're uniquely that, especially in small companies, in small organizations. That's very hard. So I love that you brought up this idea of having a buddy. Like, you need somebody to talk to. You can't be in your own bubble. And that brings me to the idea that you mentioned preceding that this selling stuff. I think we consultants often get accused of what AIs actually get accused of hallucinating. That we are selling a solution that does not touch reality. That it just seems good on paper, but we're not actually actively practicing because we're consultants, and so our input is, how would you say, either unfeasible or unrealistic, or it is not based in reality. Whereas the opposite side has the opposite problem. The team, actually, the buyer in this case, has the opposite problem. They only see their own team. So they don't know how everybody else in the industry works. So they rely on outside research to know, okay, should I follow this? But then there's a third downstream problem of this, and you highlighted this perfectly. Because then what do people do? Oh, they look at Google, they look at Facebook, they look at all these big companies, and it's like, okay, what do they do? And let's adopt what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's crazy. Like, that is the worst thing you can do. Because Google, for example, has more engineers than a small country.
Mm-hmm.
They need a governance level, like a country, a state level. Google has more engineers than most US states have citizens. Like, it's huge. To think that you need that level of structure and engineering culture, I mean,
it's ridiculous.
You can't even replicate it. Never mind that you need it. You can't even replicate it. It's too expensive to replicate. You can't replicate an entire system governing 250,000 people and apply it to a team of 5. Because you just can't. There's just too much things that you don't have time for to actually do. And then a lot of engineers just look at, it's like, Fang hires like this. They promote like this. They run their processes like this. They don't do testing. They do testing. It's data-driven. It's not data-driven. It's quick. It's dirty. They have billions of users, so 1% is already a huge. Then you have a little SMB, and it's like, well, we have 2 users, and most of them use our software on Thursday, and we want 99.9995% of that. It's silly. So that's really hard, because then you get things like Agile, and then you get things like Lean, which really are just principles. They're not a framework. So they don't tell you the architecture of your team. They tell you let me zoom out a bit. They don't tell you the architecture of your team. They tell you basically this, what you just said. Figure it out for yourself. And I think a lot of leaders just are either overwhelmed or too inexperienced to do this figuring it out for yourself. Or they might be seen as incompetent for saying, hey, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. And that sort of lack of trust, lack of goodwill, then causes these don't invent it, not invent it here, just copy it. and then it's being copied and applied badly, and then everybody does. Oh, we do Scrum kind of, but our own way, or we do Agile kind of, and our own way,
Yeah,
which is good,
everyone is doing kind of.
kind of.
And
Yes.
this is the thing is everyone does have the unique custom context, but most of
Yes.
the people treat it like, no, it's basically something which is a pattern. So there are people out there, when you take a look on LinkedIn about,
Hmm.
you mentioned Scrum, Lean Agile, but you can do it with Scrum as well. You have posts like, don't use Scrum, Agile is something different. And some
Exactly.
people referring to the Agile Manifesto. Most people never read that pamphlet. It's like,
Or the
yeah,
Scrum book, like the
yeah, or
Scrum
Scrum
also
book,
has a
or
book. Yeah.
any kind of DevOps handbooks or something like that,
Yeah.
which goes into a similar direction of methodologies. The
Yeah.
problem with methodologies, they are, let's say, theories. They are not more than
Hmm.
theories. They are
They're
theories.
frameworks solving a very specific problem in a very specific context in a very specific size of company.
Exactly,
Usually,
and
when you open these books, they are for a large public
exactly.
company which has 17 different departments, and then one of them or five of them have to collaborate in this and that manner.
Yeah, you don't invent those in a three people company, and say, oh,
Exactly.
everyone's using that now. So
Exactly. And if you do,
those
you'll run slower than if you were doing something on your own. And
exactly.
I
So
think that's the.
this is what I never really understood is when I take a look at LinkedIn, the audiences there, the audiences of others, the readers, the listeners, the watchers, most of them are in smaller to maximum
Yes.
medium-sized
Yes.
companies, but everyone is talking about corporate level architectures, technologies, frameworks, methodologies. And this
Hmm.
is actually wrong. And this is why I say basically so often the word context.
Hmm.
It is not your context. So stop arguing about which is the best framework for your three people. The best framework for your three people is talking to each other.
Hmm.
If you have a problem, tell it.
Yeah.
If you have a question, ask it. And if you got asked, answer it. So this is a framework already, and that works.
Hmm.
And this is I made several videos about that because I'm often quite angry when I read those things. I really have to say that because, and maybe it is a controversial day, so I think I should say this today. It is about, we are all doing business. Even developers are doing business. They think they're doing tech, but in reality, they're creating values for a
Business.
business
Yeah.
product. There must be a business outcome.
So true. So true.
Exactly. So we should not think about which is the best framework we can work in, which is the best language.
Yeah.
Shall we use TypeScript or JavaScript? I can't hear that anymore. It's a little bit boring, to be
It
honest.
is boring.
It doesn't have any value to a business outcome. And in my opinion, we should think more about what can we actually do to sustain businesses so that workplaces, jobs, and all this kind of stuff can be created. When I create a LinkedIn ad for a position,
Hmm.
you get up to 800 let's say applicants in 2 or 3 days.
Hmm.
So and you next time you do that, you get them again. So what can we do as tech leads, CTOs, and developers, senior developers or whatever, to create new jobs? And this is to create better products, to
Yeah.
sell more, and not talk about shall we use this language or that language, or is PHP dead or not. It's not interesting for me anymore to talk about that.
Yeah.
And to round this topic a little bit up, LinkedIn is not a representation of real problems in the business, which is the thing why so many real CTOs and CEOs of larger companies are really communicating on that platform. They read. This is the typical shadow audience, how they are called. But in reality, they are in small groups. I am in some of those groups, and they're talking all day long inside there, but nothing, because it is, as you said, they are in a pretty lonely situation because they face the real problems. They get the real pressure from the market, and they need to make decisions for 5 to 10 years, which you cannot just revert. And
their situation is not textbook. They need a custom tailored solution to them, and whoever they are talking to needs to understand their context. Whoever they're talking to needs to be aware of what their context means, so that their context is more important than the textbook's implementation.
Exactly. And those books and podcasts and posts on LinkedIn are great as theories. So we should not make them too practical, in my opinion. This is the reason why I don't no, I don't do hands-on on LinkedIn, because if I do that, it is so specific that no one really can do something with that. For example, so yeah, I like the ideas behind that. I like that people understand and learn about things so that they can transfer the ideas, pick the right ideas for their context and apply them, test them, try out, find the right way. But before you make real decisions, long-term decisions, understand what you do. There are so many CTOs and alike out there who are struggling with with their decisions of 12 months ago, and they cannot revert it. And this is something I really want to say, especially please on those architectural posts, go for modular, monolith, or microservices. Think about what you actually do. You will not revert. You will not switch your architecture. You won't. No matter what people say, you won't do that. So think upfront, 5 to 10 years. This is your decision range. Okay,
we already have a few comments. We already have a few comments in chat. So Christian mentioned, it's made a comment on monotasking. It seems to be liking PR approval on monotasking. You want to comment on that? We also have a comment from Raul, but agreeing with you, which is the best X that works for us. So coming into context, and a comment from Thomas Eichinger. Your profile is private. So to use an ecosystem Java, JS for specific business problem is important. Each ecosystem has benefits and drawbacks and need to be decided by the business what to choose. I agree. What do you think about this? I saw a lot about this discussions about, is the choice of the framework, is that strategy or is that an engineering team's tool?
Okay, first of all, to clarify context for a discussion, we have the strategic level, we have the tactical level, and we have the operational level. And it's definitely not an operational thing. So it's not a decision of the developer because he had tested it out in a side project.
Great
point. It is not the decision either from of the CEO of the company, because he saw that on a conference and a good guy of him said he shall use this. So it's something in between. So I would classify it as it is close to strategic, but it's tactical. Yeah. So you want to have a business goal. You have business goal that you have. You can set requirements. You can set qualities, and then you can say, of course, okay, we have this now as our requirements framework, and what of those frameworks would likely fit best into that. So, for example, which is most often not a newest framework, because basically in every of those long-term decisions, you have something like sustainability. And you cannot take the 6-month-old framework and say, okay, it fits into sustainability. No, it doesn't. You can't use that. So you need to go from, the best thing is start with the qualities or non-functional requirements and go to the requirements and see that as a tactical decision, which is then a decision which needs to be executed by the operational levels.
Makes sense. And I like that you mentioned this idea of it's something in between, so strategy and tactics. So it sounds like it's almost product engineering, but more on the architectural level, but not just technology architecture, but also the architecture of the communication structures of how the teams are collaborating, how the effort is being planned and executed, not just how the code is being shipped. And I think that segues now perfectly into our main topic of discussions, because we wanted to talk about pull requests. So I don't know about you, but I hate long pull requests, large pull requests that don't get closed. From a lean perspective, one of the worst, and I think you wrote on this today, it's like one of the worst things about lean is inventory. Right? It's like you don't want code sitting on a PR forever, not being merged, especially if then the urgency is gone. It's like, it was really urgent to make it, now it's done, but now it's not merged, now it's not being, there's no feedback loop. What is your stance on pull requests? When not, never? Are we extreme on this idea? We are controversial, but are we extreme? Are we absolute?
So when I start to write, so of course there's some emotion to that, because we went through some stuff in our life and several iterations. So in the first years of my developer experience, we still used no version control at all, and then we used Subversion or SVN. And there was trunk-based development was quite handy there because
Yeah.
branching was quite complicated back then.
And expensive and slow.
And yeah, exactly. So yeah, you really,
Subversion.
yeah, it was server side and all this kind of stuff. And then when Git was a thing, I don't know when we switched with the main thing we did back then. I think 7 or 8
mid
years ago.
2000s, 2008-ish, 2010 was when
Yeah,
Git
but
was.
for me personally, I'm on. But
I see.
then there was this kind where I think it was Atlassian with its Git flow diagrams, and everyone knew this diagram thing where they have
Develop,
pages
master,
of
release.
And I thought, oh, that sounds good, because several clients and several partners back then, they practiced that, and they showed their what was it, the source tree, I think it was, and they were so happy. It looked like a tree, like a train plan on a train station where everything and
it's
I
very
thought,
structured. Recht in Ordnung. It's very organized.
What do you actually see there? But yeah, everyone was seeing something there, but I noticed back then already everyone was seeing different things there, because it wasn't readable for a human what actually happens there. There's 6 lanes next to each other, 7 lanes. And some people rebase, some people merged, and some people don't know when to rebase and all this kind of stuff. And we ditched that quite early, to be honest, because we were in a small to medium-sized business context. So we had large companies as clients, but we were rather small teams. And we had the idea we need to get stuff out. So no one was waiting for us. Everyone wanted to have immediate things, get it out. So we were pretty early on in this idea of trunk-based development, even if we weren't used the name for it. So we just did it, let's say, and we just had 1 branch or 2 branches, like a master and a development branch or something like that. And everyone was basically pushing towards that one. And since we did that next to each other, it was working quite well, I have to say. There was no stacking up. And every time someone created a branch, this was a dangling branch. Even if it was merged already, it wasn't somehow, and no one knew. And as soon as you branch, you run into a strange situation. And because everything is running so fast, everything is so client driven, so business driven, that you actually need to get done in the moment when you are done and not later. So the idea of quality assurance is, of course, very important when it comes to large corporations. When you have certifications like SOC 2 or something like that, I understand that. When you are creating pharmaceutics, when you are, in a banking system or something like that, I understand that you need to have multiple layers of security and quality assurance in place. But let's stay shortly with a small to medium-sized context where most people creating software for others or SaaS products. You don't need that there if you have good tests in place, if you have a good communication and culture in place. Then you create better business outcome if you really do that way. This is what we experience. So everything I say today is personal experience as tech lead and CTO and business outcome. So I'm an entrepreneur myself. So I'm basically accountable for everything what happens there. And we had a better business outcome when we actually avoided to use PRs. And a little later, when we got into this, we made this from time to time the CTO fellowship program where we team up with other CTOs and work on their problems. That's quite interesting. I saw that exactly those problems: branches, code reviews, and the second backlog. There's this second backlog. You have your backlog, and you have a backlog on this side. And this side backlog, no one knows what happens inside there. On the left-hand side, this is pressuring. The right-hand side is not getting smaller. And this is basically a problem for so many companies out there, because those are not, they're not done. People don't have time. And people, and when they get to it, because there's such a pressure on it to get this backlog done on some point, they just click it through, force push. And then I think to myself, what are you doing there? It's
and that produces
pointless.
Low quality. The more you force it, the lower the quality.
Yeah, and then you have
of the volume.
Now, then they have clients who calling me or colleagues of me or a call center or something like that and saying, "Hey, what's with my change? What changed? I wanted to have a headline changed. Okay, I take a look. Okay, this is a pull request waiting for approval." And I think to myself, seriously now. So in the ticket is, change this from A to B. And you see in your code as a developer, I changed it from A to B. Okay, push it, deploy it, continuous deployment, get it to the client. You don't need to have an approval for that. If you need to have an approval for that, or you're afraid to break the system, you have some serious other issues. This is not the PR thing, which is really bringing you to the point where you can actually do that. This is not what you do. So you should focus on flow, on business, and good communication.
Okay.
I hope I hit the topic.
Yes, and I'm not interrupting you. I just want to help you because we do have questions in chat and comments in chat regarding exactly what you're talking about. So let's start on Thomas's comment. I'll just read it out. Pull requests are only usable if you're a developer and have some robots, programmers who are creating the code and you want to include the code into your app. Then I would say a pull request is good. Otherwise, if there are software devs who create code, then they follow coding rules and have to check the code rules by review, then the developer will merge it into the CI. Now, I already see some discrepancies here. Thomas, thank you for the comment. What do you think about this? Well, what is the alternative to not doing pull requests? Let's talk about that first. If there's no pull requests, right? So for those there are people on our stream right now to whom pull requests is by far the alpha and omega of how you do software. They have never seen anything else, and if you suggest something else that does not include a review process with a pull request, it will be alien and controversial. So to show them that this is normal, what does a team look like that doesn't do pull requests?
Okay, I can give an example, a real life example. Let's assume you have a team of 5 developers, a team lead, another senior, 2 mid-level developers, and 2 junior developers. So a totally mixed team. And you have a development branch. So you have a development branch and a master or main branch. And the main branch is basically deployed onto the production system via CI/CD. And the other one is basically deployed with every push onto a staging environment, which is a real production environment just with another database. So it's very simplified small to medium-sized business example. So you can, for example, first of all, let's say, make a pull request to actually make a live update. This is an option you can do because there is another aspect to it. So we need to differentiate. We don't, in my opinion, we don't need pull requests between developers, but it's different thing between the team and other, let's say, other entities like clients or product owners.
Yes.
If they want to review because they need to show it to someone, this is something else. So this is the reason.
So the difference between deployment, release, and perhaps merging, right? Exactly. So you can merge it to master but not release it, or you can merge it and deploy it but then have it feature flag so it's not released, right? So we're talking about these different concepts.
Exactly. So feature flags are great options, but not always applicable. So this is a different topic.
You might still break things accidentally, so you might still need a level of
exactly. And sometimes, especially, sometimes it's just let's say a lot of cosmetic changes. As I said, some textual changes, especially when it's get to front-end things, then feature flags are very applicable. It's very hard to apply them because it will get messy. You have so many feature flags then, and you need to, you pull that out on some time. So in my opinion, when you don't need continuous deployment from developer to the client, and this is quite elitist. So it is doable, but in my opinion, not really necessary. So if you have a good staging system in between, you have that already what you want to do. The idea is you ask me for an alternative. A developer, in my opinion, should be a mature person, which means responsible.
Responsible professional. Yes,
exactly. And responsible is the intrinsic motivation to do things in a way that actually no one needs to take a look over my code because I make it work. Otherwise, I don't push my stuff. So, for example, there is no PR in place. I can push it, will be deployed on stage, and clients can see the test version of stage. This is the current scenario.
So there's continuous delivery, but there are 2 continuous things being delivered, and the thing that has the least oversight is the staging environment. So there's no branch isolation.
Yeah, so to say. So exactly. And the point is that you as a developer with this responsibility, and when everyone is doing that, it becomes a team maturity. Then you know that everyone who was pushing was actually making sure that this can work well. So, for
Yes.
example, James Galen, who's posting or commenting on the post as well, he's doing that in his company with self-approval PRs. So that would be a possible thing. In our company, we basically do the same, but we just, without a PR, we just say our commit, we check our commit, we make our builds, we make our tests locally, and then we push. But then the ticket is done. For the developers, it's done. So when we push, a ticket must be done. And if we cannot reach or fulfill definition of done, then we need to either ask someone or find a solution for that. For example, I am not sure because I'm a mid-level developer and I need to change something on the architectural level. So this is something I think I should not do. And then what I do is I ask. I don't make a pull request and hope that this person in the next 2 weeks
you make it synchronous. You ask now. You interrupt somebody and go and ask because you're
exactly blocked. And this person then, because we have this culture in place, we have this commitment that we help each other, and this is important, I don't ask because of everything. I only ask when I really have a problem,
when you're actually blocked, not just because you're incompetent or lazy or like low energy or burnt out. So
exactly. And then you actually need to only have that for, let's say 5, maybe maximum of 15 minutes, and then you should get to the process where you're actually done.
Okay. So Balazs Hidaketi, I believe I pronounced it correctly, says you probably don't need PRs, pull requests, if you use unit testing and have the right architecture. But except your company, how many times have you seen teams not using unit testing and having good or poor architecture?
We don't use unit tests.
Sorry?
We don't use unit tests mostly.
That is my experience as well. Unit testing is by far the last thing you need for continuous integration. So this does touch on integration, and I think Muhammad has a similar point here. I joined the stream a little bit late. I'm a tech lead. I use pull requests not only for approval, but also as a way to show best practices to my team members. What will be the alternative? If I feel like I don't want poor quality code to be merged into our main branch and deployed automatically. Wow, this is such. I think this is the number one reason why that is being used. Sometimes for the wrong reason. Why pull requests are still around? Great question. I love that you asked this question. Thank you so much for asking this question. I do have a double. I believe you double posted the question. There is the same one. Yes. No, it's not the same one. I joined the stream a little bit late. I'm thinking if I don't feel like I don't want poor quality code to be merged, I also don't want to miss the chance to mentor my team. Oh, so he edited his post. So review with the benevolent outcome of wanting to help somebody, let's say who's more junior, or maybe just two seniors sharing domain context about what this one knows and this one doesn't know, and then learning from each other, even if it's just peers and equally senior. What is the alternative if we don't do pull requests?
So in my opinion, so first of all, we don't say don't make code reviews, or I don't say that. I just say don't make them or in an asynchronous way. So first of all, what you can do is team up. So if you ask a question to someone, hey, can you help me? Then it's basically a pairing. If 2 people are coming to help you, this is the thing of monotasking later, then you're actually swarming. You get a thing done. So there's this in this DevOps handbook, I think, what was it? I don't know. It was this end on core. No, it wasn't a goal. I don't know. It was this end on court idea. So if there's a serious problem,
I think that's left shift. That's the DevOps.
Maybe. And then basically you pull the cord and you get this problem out of the way and you go again. And in that moment, you transfer the knowledge to others. And the other thing is, when you have a continuous delivery, continuous deployment, whatever, a trunk base, so you stay in a flow, and you have this maturity level, you have this competency level, and you are a responsible person. And you think, okay, I can push this now, but we need to talk on another point about that. You should still go into team meetings. You should still talk about what went wrong, what went good, and you should take examples and talk about things, but it should not be a criteria of actually deploying the code, So you always can do refactorings and improvements, but as long as you have the ability to roll forward, so assuming because of that, outage happens. Worst case scenario, an outage happens.
Yes.
Then people in this idea of the Anden cord coming together, monotasking, that must be fixed. Pipeline must be green again.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you can do that, you are actually, let's say, fixed in up, let's say, between 5 to 15 minutes, depending on your pipeline.
Absolutely.
And if you have a staging system with end-to-end tests in place,
Mm-hmm.
this will be caught by the staging system anyway. So in
Mm-hmm.
99% of the cases. So this is, in my opinion, those both alternatives, or in combination, are a better alternative than trying to solve this via API, because everyone is telling to do that since Atlassian told us to.
Yes. And what I see, so we have a Pankaj has a question. Recently joined a startup. They don't have, they heard from a startup. They don't have branches in their Git repos. Is that monotasking? Do you want to address this? Short.
I don't see the question. Hello?
You recently joined a startup. They don't have branches in their Git repos. Is that monotasking?
No, I wouldn't say that this is direct comparison to monotasking. So maybe I understand monotasking wrong, because monotasking is the task and the branch is another thing. So you can have several, for example, you could work on several tasks on the same branch. You can work on the same task on the same branch.
Yes.
So this doesn't describe. So there are two different things. So the one is in which type of version control system you push, or let's say methodology you push there, and the other thing is how you actually receive work and tell someone else and communicate on the ticket level.
Balash has a comment. He might be referring to a monorepo, so that's one giant repository for, let's say, a backend or front end, or all the microservices are in one repository. But I would say it is an integration focused choice. It has nothing to do with whether the team is monotasking or not. Lean has this idea of, in Lean, and this idea of stopping the line and pulling the plug, that is a Lean / extreme programming concept. It's this idea of what is the largest monotasking unit that you can put a team on, right? So if I'm cooking a meal, if I'm in a kitchen and I'm cooking dinner, if I can do everything by myself, then the largest monotasking unit is one. I can't put more people onto this task without disrupting the flow. If I put 2 people on it, it will slow down. If I put 3 people on it, this is what Fred Brooks meant in his original, the Mythical Man Month collection of essays about just putting more people onto the project beyond the monotasking limit. I think that's the phrase he was lacking. He didn't mention, right? So putting more people onto a task beyond the monotasking limit slows the team down. And it's our job as leaders to figure out what is the monotasking limit for a task. And we should always set the team in such a way that the largest monotasking unit is working on a single task. Maybe you're building a bike, and the bike needs a handle, the bike needs a front tire, a back tire. Formula One. The Formula One, the pit stop, the process of a pit stop, that's a monotask. That is one task that requires the perfect collaboration of 7 people to perform. One thing is wrong, you stop the line. One thing is wrong, everybody's workflow gets disrupted. That's what monotasking is. And the opposite to monotasking, to answer that question, is a feature factory, where there's 7 people, and 7 people are working on 7 different things. So they have to interrupt each other, or asynchronously interrupt each other, and beg for collaboration through pull requests, to sign-offs, to reviews, to, I don't know, some companies have release rituals where everything is in branches, and then you do that octopus merge into the release, and then you review the release. So I would separate out, we have a comment here stating that learning and teaching with pull requests or code reviews is a bad practice. And I agree here if we add context, right? So the better way to do it is to pair with the developer. If you wait for the pull request, it's already too late, because all of the bad decisions have been made, and the context under which they were made is now possibly gone. So the developer now has to go relive the pain and sort of go through it again, because the pull request is too late, right? So I think if you go to minimumcd.org, minimumcd.com, you will see this highlighted. Number one, best way to do pull requests, don't do them. Just pair program. Do everything in a size 2 monotasking unit. 2
Yeah.
pairs, 3 pairs, 4 pairs. Even if it's just I'm working on something and Adrian, you're here sitting across my shoulder, or we're sort of huddling passively on Slack, and I'm just like I'm typing something. Hey, is that ready? Or maybe that's how I communicate with the front end developer. It's like, hey, I'm about to push this. We need to sort of sync up. If that is being continuously reviewed, that is already good enough. If that can't be done, number two, the alternative to pull requests is synchronous pull requests. Just review it the moment you create the pull request or you want to merge. Like rather than creating a pull request and then assigning it to someone and then going away.
Yeah, but if you the big question is, do you really need that, or every push or change wrapped up in a pull
if I'm
request to
fixing a
review?
typo in a test, I absolutely don't want to wait for review,
So-
right? So that's
So having that set up in your GitHub Actions setting as a requirement, then it doesn't make sense to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to go back on this idea of tests and architecture, I think we're missing the point when we're talking about a sort of continuous QA. Like pull requests are not about continuous QA. Pull requests are about integration and collaboration. Like what we should isolation in order to test something in isolation, that's good. What's not good is isolation so that 7 people can work on 7 different things at the same time. That's the problem. The problem is when 7 people work on 7 different things, the project should be in an extremely broken state, because that is the only way how they will force each other to integrate as fast as possible. The longer they stay isolated, the worse the essential merging depth that they incur. And pull requests are already it's like a vitamin pill for cancer. Like it's not the right level of solution. Especially
it's more likely to it's more likely to went bad than it will be a successful addition to your flow.
Mm-hmm. So we had a comment here. Let me refresh real quick. So this idea that unit tests and behavior tests are needed, otherwise pull requests are needed, because otherwise who is looking if the whole system is working? So yes, so this comment was what we talked about earlier regarding there needs to be like a red-green system. Like something has to say, yeah, you know what, not deployable right now.
Yeah, I would like to put something up front, because this is a problem, especially amongst junior developers getting into the mid-level. I face that quite often, is that they really rely on their tests because of missing understanding of actual architecture. And so architecture is nothing for only seniors. Architecture is something you should understand quite early, and into the architecture thing, I would wrap the programming principles as well. Shout out to Nicholas Ockett, who is a great person talking and teaching about that.
Yep.
It's something you really should think and look into, because just want to say this specific example we just read as a comment. So when you need to have a unit test in place to make sure that your specific change doesn't break the entire system, then you do something wrong per se, because your unit test is not made for this. Your unit test is only for this unit. So you cannot really say that this unit test will tell you anything about
it doesn't integrate into the production environment.
So that's the point. This is why, in my opinion, because I'm more on the business level now, and from this standpoint, I say, for me, the integration tests, so the critical path in integration tests, they must work. But if a single unit would be affected, then first of all, it's okay for me. Second, it shouldn't be the case. And there we come to, coupling and cohesion, the single responsibility pattern, all this kind of stuff. You need to apply those things in order that you don't need tests. Actually, tests are a guardrail. They are not adding any value. So they are just to ensure that it's working. But it doesn't, it's always best to not. So it's like a bullet. It's better to not get hit by the bullet than to have the best bulletproof armor.
You can't inspect quality.
Exactly.
You have to plan for it. You have to build it into the system. Once it's built, you can't improve the quality just by inspecting, right? So that's why most QA processes are flawed. Exactly. And I see this, and this is also very well mentioned. We were just finishing up a book club today on implementing new software development, and they have a very good case study here, right? Where when leaders set up incentives, KPIs or even promotion incentives to find bugs, it'll incentivize people to create bugs so that they can fix them. Mm-hmm. But what QA should really be doing, QA should be preventing defects on the entire value stream by working with the developer and prevent them from even putting them into the system. And that's about requirements gathering. Like, we need to define what the requirements are so defects are less likely to pop up. And Balazs mentioned this as well. Key factor is maturity of the team, and you'll love this take because you posted on this today. Muhammad says, I don't have enough seniors on my team to make them do pair programming with other developers, right? So this is the old, my team is not mature enough for that level of autonomy. What is your opinion on this?
As I said in the very beginning, you need to lay the foundation today for the years to come, which means if you have today the problem, then make sure that you start today, that you have in some weeks or month this problem not anymore. So this is something you should do now. Of course, you cannot, magically summon some senior developers into your team and say, hey, and even if you do, it doesn't mean that they are so integrated into the culture of the team already that is, directly work from day one. So first of all, you need to cultivate the culture from day one. This is the most important thing. And if you are a team leader, then it's basically not your fault. Go a little bit higher and ask the supervisors, the C-level, for a better culture in this place. I say this as a CTO now. It is always, when something happened like this in my organization, it was my fault, not the fault of others that we don't have the right people there or something like that. So it's my fault to not foster that from day one. But of course, let's say, what can we do to actually do something about that? Of course, pair programming is an expensive thing. So pair programming, especially if you do that, so for mentoring, so for pure mentoring, onboarding, you cannot just do 5 minutes of pair programming a day. You need to do that several hours a day. And that means you have at least twice the costs for a developer in that area for onboarding purposes. This is, of course, expensive. And when we stick to the context of, let's say, 5 to 50 people in a company, this makes a lot of difference. So in my opinion, you should implement a technical system then, which allows you, as I said, to roll forward onto a staging system which behaves like a production system. And you go in, let's say, every 2 or 3 days together with your small team and talk about what happens. Let's go through the pipeline and say, hey, why wasn't this building actually? Why the tests were failing, or there was a type error or something like that. So or
somebody forgot to run migrations and part of the deploy is automated. Like, so
and then talk about that, and then start to ask your junior developers. It's not like the senior is not a policeman in this case, finding faults. It is more like the juniors shall have the feeling that they can ask the more experienced person to every time without getting blamed or something like that. This is the reason why I hate this blame function in the IDEs. It should not be called blame function.
You're just inspecting where it originated.
It is.
What is the origin of the?
You need to see it that way. If a junior developer is allowed to make mistakes and is allowed to deploy on stage, not on production, that's okay, only on stage, and he does produce a problem, he or she, then it's totally fine. Talk about that, make it a topic in a positive way, because most people in a team like this will most likely run into the same trap as this developer or was doing anyway. So in my opinion, it's again a cultural thing where communication is key. Make people allowed to ask, make people allowed to fail, and those are keys to
encourage failure.
Yeah, and then you will see
allow them to make mistakes in a safe environment.
And then you will see that you will get your seniors out of your people you have in a longer period of time on the longer scale.
And this is such an important point, because seniors are seniors and leaders are leaders because they make good decisions. And they make good decisions because they have a lot of experience. And they have a lot of experience because they made a lot of bad decisions in their lives and they learned from it. Right? So if your process, Muhammad then follows up saying, with draft PR, my team can push their code in chunks so I can review it, even if the task is still not 100% complete yet. But pair programming will be the ideal solution indeed to make sure the quality is good and I can mentor my team without any wasted work, like you mentioned. And I think in a way this is benevolent, but you're also the problem. Like you're the solution, but you're also the problem. See, the team should be able to push without you intervening. Like, because if you're signing off on every PR, then mistakes might be prevented. So they need to be able to do mistakes and then learn what happens when they do a mistake. Like they need to do the thing they're afraid of more often. So they need to break production more often. Now, they need to break production in a way that doesn't negatively affect customers. And that's a healthy thing. Google breaks production all the time, but you don't know about it because they roll it out in such a way that it is safe to do so. And Adrian, you mentioned as well, like you have this rolling out the stage and then rolling out the production. It's like if you break stage, and stage is very close to production, that's an important key here, then definitely roll it out the stage, see if it breaks, and then continue. But roll out the main branch, not the feature branch. Roll out the main integrated artifact that will go out to the main system and do it as often as possible. You want to minimize the delay between feedback cycles, right? So ideally, you want if I write some code and it takes 15 minutes, I want feedback now. I don't want to wait 2 days until it gets reviewed and merged and deployed and then tested. Right? That's too slow. That's where all the productivity is already gone. You can't get it back. You can't get it back by doing a retrospective. Right? I think this touches upon, and you mentioned something very important earlier. If you're being defensive and you want to be careful, that's fine. But if you know you have this problem today, you need to prepare for it. And I see this so much where there are junior hires, year one, and then the process gets optimized for juniors. And then the juniors stay juniors because the process doesn't allow them to grow. Because the process prevents them from doing mistakes. So they can't learn. Which means that once a senior gets onto the team, because the juniors don't grow, so you will give up on it in 2 or 3 years and hire a senior. And then the senior won't follow the process because they will see that it's silly. And I see a lot of that, especially in small and medium businesses, in startups, in agencies, where it's like, no, like, guys, this is not healthy. And in a way, that's also the controversial stuff that you and I met to talk about today. It's like when you put somebody onto a process that prevents growth, that's in a way emotional. It's triggering. It's like, guys, this is not healthy. Like if I'm responsible for this change and it has to be approved by 3 of my manager, my team lead, my QA guy, and then that other person out there who's talking to the customer, that's not okay. I should be responsible for that. I was tasked with this. Yes, I can collaborate with people, but I should be responsible. If I can fix it in 20 minutes, it should be out in production in 20 minutes. If I can do that, the system should never prevent me from putting new value, new features into the customer's hands. And I think PRs are the main problem with that nowadays. I think from what I'm seeing, I coach a lot of teams on this problem exactly. And I'm so glad, I had an example of this week. One of the engineers asked me, one of my also long one-on-one coaching clients, we have a lot of history, and they asked me, we're going away from PR slowly now with this team, but very slowly. They still have it, but sort of the restrictions are being taken away, so that the team becomes more and more autonomous. And they asked a really cool question today. They asked me, Dennis, I think the PR is now almost ready. I got it, I tested it, it works. I want to merge it. But it got a bit big, so now I'm waiting for review. What should I do in the meantime? Because I know that they would normally start working on another task. And I told them, okay, you ready for review? Call up the person who will review. Go pair with them now and just pair review now. After lunch, just pair review with them and get it merged. Don't start on something else. That is the worst thing you can do. Don't parallelize. Because if you start, there's context switch, then there's 2 things now waiting. The other developer also has 2 things waiting. So you just have this mesh of unfinished inventory laying around in the code base. And what happened is that they got immediate feedback. They acted upon it. Then they realized that there was feedback to the degree that they actually had to go and work on it rather than doing the other thing. And then it got merged. And then that's the best way to go about it. When you're done, immediately go to the person who will review it and review it with them. If you can't find anybody, review it yourself. Do a self-review. Just you go over your own code and review it and get it ready to be merged. If nobody gets there, merge it yourself. But at least go to the effort of reviewing what you created. Do it with the same level of scrutiny that you would go. Of course, there is bias, and we can't go around the bias. But it's a very healthy sort of habit that is starting to evolve about, oh, this is now done. What should I do with it? Well, get it into the customer's hand as fast as possible.
There's this analogy when a housekeeper or some craftsman come to you and repair something in your household. You tighten the screws of your windows. Mm-hmm. And they say goodbye, and you say goodbye. You never see this person again, probably. Mm-hmm. And they don't tell you, in 2 days, there's coming my colleague, and he's taking a look if I screwed it right. That doesn't happen. So it is a problem in IT.
They review it themselves.
Yeah, it's a problem in IT that we lost a sense of responsibility in that case. So my very first job wasn't developer. To that time I was some kind of doing that as a side hustle. It was 24 years ago, and I started basically to doing in a print house. I was working, mm-hmm. and there was no such kind of approvals there or something like that. You were fully responsible for your work. Yes. And that was basically in all those areas as well. And when I got into the IT, and especially in the last 5 years, you see everywhere everyone is hiding behind PRs. Mm-hmm. I even hear that from freelancers that they really say, oh, I assign my PR to a person who's on holiday. Then
I'm working on the next thing.
I have a free week off. No one is doing something to me.
And that's wasted
this is
inventory.
an anti-pattern. You shouldn't do this.
And that's the biggest waste. The McKinsey article recently, really pushed off a lot of flack and let this wave about trying to measure productivity. And I think the biggest enemy of productivity is engineers working on something that is not mission critical, and not deleting enough code. If I figure out that what I'm working on, let's say somebody requested it, and I'm shadowing an engineer who's working on this, and they start working on it, and it's urgent, and then the urgency disappears. Somebody requested it, and the urgency disappears. I tell them, can this go out today? Oh, no. But it also doesn't have to. They said it's not urgent anymore. And I asked them, okay, but should we still finish this? It's like, what do you mean? It's in Jira. Mm-hmm. Why not? I'm halfway done now. Because I tell them, well, you can save half of the remaining time that you would now waste if it's no longer urgent. Maybe they actually don't need it anymore. Because the problem with a lot of product requests is if the team does not have a healthy habit of saying no to silly requests, they will be bombarded with somebody's wish list. Mm-hmm. And nobody cares about their wishy-washy wish list. Everybody who has 100 things they want, they really only want 1 or 2 important things. It's our job to figure out what those 1 or 2 important things are, and not bloat requirements, not bloat scope, not bloat a backlog. Having a backlog, I hate when people create tickets and then they put them in the backlog. It's like, yeah, we'll get to that. No, it won't.
This is
and if it was in the backlog for 3 months, you should remove it, because now you don't even know whether it's relevant anymore, right? So as things age, this is super important. Go ahead.
Product owners or clients should not have access to the developer's backlog. This is some
list, yeah.
It is ideas, dreams, visions, all this kind of stuff. What I want to have on someday, a one-liner, sometimes a screenshot, just a link of another page. Do it like this. I saw all this, and this developer sits there and suddenly he needs to become product owner himself, and needs to be a designer on some point. This is not what you should do. You should create tickets where the developer takes a ticket, It says, okay, I need to do, I know what I need to do, and I
Yes.
know what my definition of done is. I see it
Yeah.
clearly here. My acceptance requirements in an exact form, in a technical, understood form, which means that someone in your team, this is always preferable, but I know it's not always possible, but it is always good that some of your seniors or tech leads are filtering tickets or wish lists out into real tickets, which
Real.
your
Yeah.
team is able to
Actionable. To
understand.
make them actionable. Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, they're not actionable. If
And then you
I
don't need
can't
code
tell from
reviews.
the ticket, yeah, exactly. And if I can't tell from the ticket when it will be done based on the definition that's in the ticket, then I'm not even starting it. And a
Mhm.
lot of juniors and a lot of mid-level engineers don't know that. They think that the perfect ticket has to be handed to them, and if it isn't, they start anyway. Right? The path to growth is in saying no. It's like I'm not starting this ticket because I don't know what it means. I don't know what it looks like when it's done. Like yes,
Mhm.
there's a bug and you want it fixed, but this seems like intended behavior and you want it to behave somehow differently. I can't right now. I don't have enough imagination to really understand why this was requested. And usually you don't have these conversations because
This is
if you go,
actually this is basically a issue in our industry for let's say years already, and it comes from the time where software developers were just people in on an operational level fulfilling tasks
yeah,
for the CEOs, product managers back then,
and it
and
was
those
just
were the
databases,
bosses.
and it was
Yeah,
just databases. Hey, the database.
yeah, yeah,
I need a new view. I need a new output. I need a new report. This is what it should look like
yeah.
because it
But
was declarative. Because
yeah,
the
yeah, and
because the because this the task being performed was declarative. There was very little compute going on. Very little imperative side effects going on. Because if you go to the pre-Web 2.0 era, it was just, I have this data. I want the HTML to be structured like this.
mm,
So the tasks themselves were extremely data driven, declarative. They said, I need a PDF that looks like this, and the logo has to be there. That's the make my logo bigger kind of jokes from the 2000s, where that was actually 90% of engineering back then. There weren't any complex issues to solve because the internet wasn't fast enough, the
yeah.
CPUs weren't strong enough, and everybody was just building things one page at a time. God forbid that we would have like a giant JSON being, asynchronously sent over the wire to a mobile phone, and then it destructures it and re-renders a screen. That was impossible back then. But nowadays, even the ecosystem of how many libraries are being used is so complex that you need to be precise in the language. The person doing the request, the creating the ticket, has to be extremely precise in what they want. And
Mhm.
if the ticket is not in that form, it is the developer's responsibility to nurture conversation, and I think that's where this breaks down. And if that is then being fixed in the PRs, that is not the right place to fix that, because it's too late, because the
Yeah.
damage has already been done and you can't inspect the fix into the code.
And this is actually what is up there. Yes, engineering culture. There you see that in
Engineering
the
culture,
stream.
yes,
Engineering
yes.
culture. So engineering culture doesn't mean that the culture between the engineers. It is engineering is a central part of a company which sells a SaaS product or something like that.
Almost
So
every
every
company nowadays is a tech company.
right,
Everybody is a tech
exactly.
company.
So this is not like the IT department is some kind of
McDonald's
department
is a
somewhere.
tech company.
Everyone
you know
is. And so we
Everybody is
need
a
to
tech company.
have or develop a culture which is, the entire company is an engineering company, and the engineers or technicians or software developer or whatever, they are executing on the engineering level. But
Mm-hmm.
you need to find some specifications, requirements, and all this kind of stuff. It roots basically already, and let's say on a product owner side, on the sales
Yes,
side, on all this kind of stuff.
and it's all
You
the
know,
same team. It's the same value stream. Like it shouldn't be siloed. There should be
exactly.
collaboration, not just not just pairing, ensembling. You mentioned swarming with the engineers, but also with other stakeholders. If it's not clear, if the business requirements are low quality, absolutely build quality into the business requirements first before you write any line of code. And I see this a lot where engineers have this sort of imposter mentality to them, and they get stressed, and their stress release is writing code. So when they're confused, they will go and write code to sort of brain dump into the compiler. And I think that is one of the worst habits that I have to coach uncoach essentially with a lot of engineering teams, because maybe the leader has incentivized that kind of behavior, and then we sort of pincer it from both ends. Like, we'll stop creating incentives where that is encouraged, and I will help the team sort of overcome this stress factor, this stress relief. Like, we will address the root cause of the stress, which is the initial stage, the product understanding and the business requirements are not there. So the engineers are being pushed into a stressful state whenever it comes to integration, release, testing, QA, etc. Because it's the quality at the beginning of the process that was lacking, and they weren't aware of it. They're not focusing on the right thing at the right time. Adrian, we have 15 more minutes. There's a few more questions that we didn't address yet. What would you prefer?
Go for questions.
Go for questions. Okay, let's see. So we had a good question from Christian Florescu. Sounds Romanian. Encouraging failure is a leader's vision. Who's responsible for mitigating perfectionists and dream killers among team members and also at the PR review? How do you understand this question?
Me, so I understand it as actually it's going a little bit in the direction of what we say latter. It was like who's actually make accountable, actually, not really responsible, yes. Accountable for those perfectionists' problems. But I don't really understand now. Do you mean the developers' perfectionism or the PO's perfectionism?
It does seem engineering specific.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, of course, let's say we have a hierarchy on some point, even if it's low level. So you have a team leader somewhere. This person, of course, needs to make sure that the developers are onboarded well, are working in the right culture, in the right ways, with the right methodologies, and of course, not lose themselves into putting way too much time and effort into something, or write too many tests unnecessarily just to have a coverage which doesn't help you, and all this kind of stuff. So I would say, of course, the next supervisor, but supervisors have their frameworks as well. So
they're sheriffs. They're
sheriffs.
Policing. They're not. Yeah.
They're not
the
role
models. They're not role models. They're just policing. They're just enforcing the law, not making the laws, and sometimes that's problematic.
So first of all, and this is always the same. Organization, especially those on LinkedIn who's posting, who's reading there, you have on some point some kind of CTO, VP of engineering person. Sometimes it's the same person. This person needs to take responsibility and accountability for what happens in the organization, but release a framework and requirements which have enough room for, let's say, some self-improvement and custom decisions per team to actually fulfill those requirements. But the requirements need to be in a vision that that there are incentives for not being too perfectionist, but not being too lazy either. This is actually something very hard to describe in a sentence now, because this is basically the job of the tech leader of the organization,
of the engineering manager, CTO.
This is very complicated.
And I had a conversation about this week and last week with one of the leaders that I'm coaching, and I'm glad that we touched on this, because in a way, perfectionists can be measured, right? So it's not that we want to stop perfectionists from writing high quality output and providing high quality outcomes that are valuable to the client. It's not that we don't want that. What we don't want is to lose feedback, is to say, I will stop communicating until it's perfect. That's what we don't want, right? So we don't want the communication loop to suffer because of the perfectionism. If you're striving towards perfectionism and you're deploying regularly and you're doing it iteratively and you're communicating every day on like how progress is going and whether you're going to course correct or when you're going to stop, or when do you even know when you'll arrive at perfect? Do we need to reassess that question every hour, every day? I have no problem with perfectionists. My problem with perfectionists is when they isolate on a branch, they don't open up PR, and they work on something for 3 weeks. And then they open a PR, and I look at the PR. It's 4,000 lines of code, and I just instinctively say rejected. Too large, too long, break it up. Smaller
Too
PRs.
outdated.
Too outdated. Yeah, you're not integrating anymore. Like, you gave me your code to review, but your branch is now 3 weeks behind. You didn't even integrate it yet because you want me to review your code first so that we can refactor it to make it simpler, and then you'll integrate. That's such a wasted effort. Because in lean software development, there's an amazing thing here called value stream mapping, and I encourage all leaders to do value stream mapping. It starts with a customer. It ends with a customer. You need to understand how the features are flowing across this flow, because sometimes they go into a dead end. A customer requests something and they don't really want it, and the developer will make it their mission to deliver it, even though it's no longer being that the market demand has gone away, because it took to. I experienced this a lot, and I'm sorry for doing the second, third, fourth restaurant analogy, but if I order a steak or if I go for pizza and it takes 3 hours, I will walk out. And I don't care that there's a ticket, in the kitchen saying, oh, Dennis's pizza, it'll be ready in 40 minutes. I'm out. I'm no longer there. You can cancel it. I'm not going to eat it, even if it's halfway finished. Now, you might serve it to somebody else, but that is a whole different optimization level. And that's, in a way, how McDonald's works. They know that this is the only product we have. It's a commodity. This is one product. So it's a feature factory. We just produce them. We know approximately how many we need. We just crank them out. And then once the volume increases, we crank out more and create inventory, and then we serve them. But that is commoditized. Software is not like that. You can't just keep pushing out features expecting them to have market demand. Mm-hmm. And especially if the feature was requested, and then there was this low quality design process, and then some vague spec, and now the developers suffer because the intentions are not clear. When will this be done? How good should it be done? By when does it need to be done? Is the deadline realistic, or is the deadline just a stop loss?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to add that especially quality. So you mentioned that you want to become better quality, or you need to reach better quality. Perfectionism is basically a misform of reaching the perfect state. The perfect state is not infinite. The perfect state is this defined quality. So yes. Quality is absolute, not relative. Absolute is quality is defined by someone, and you need to reach the quality, not over-engineer or under-engineer. So yes. You need to reach the quality. This is the reason why the burgers at McDonald's are like burgers at McDonald's, and not like at the steakhouse.
They have exact specifications of this is a burger and that's not a burger.
Exactly. And so perfectionism is not about perfect. It's about over-engineering. Yes. Perfect is perfect engineered. It's hitting the quality.
It's precise. Yes.
Exactly. So most of the people I knew understand quality wrong. This is something I realized.
They think absolute maximum possible, maximum to my level of knowledge, and that is not what is desired. Absolutely not, because quality is usually negotiated. I want this steak medium rare. I want this one well done. And that one I want extra special. And this one, I want fries on the side. This one with no salt, this one with a little bit of salt. That's what quality is. The customer is specifying their best. It shouldn't be, oh no, the steak always needs to be medium rare. No, quality is you ordered it how it was, you served it how it was ordered. Right? And some customers say, I want it quick and dirty. I'm experimenting. I'm running a little market experiment with some of my users. I need, that's what an MVP used to be. An MVP used to be quick and dirty, done in 1 week. Building something up with like a collage with Google Forms and just having no-code prototypes. That's what it used to be. But nowadays I see, I don't know, startups entering A series to build an MVP with a funding of 5 million. And that's silly. That's a lot of wasted effort, because then what will they do with that money? Overhire. Attract. Okay, we now have 40 engineers. What should they do? Well, they're really expensive. They should crank out as many features as possible, and then and then nobody knows what's going on. So we had another question, a few more minutes, about monotasking. Balazs is asking, is non-monotasking necessarily a feature factory? So is the absence of monotasking a feature factory? He says, I don't think so. Do those people block each other? It also depends. I hear monotasking the first time, but what I see as a huge benefit is this. Communication between members, not async, but synchronous, as they have one goal, they have one value stream, even if they work on the different parts. And that's exactly it. Like this one goal, that is the value stream. And even Scrum has this. It's called a sprint goal. A Scrum team is a monotasking unit that together goes towards the sprint goal. And there's only ever one sprint goal. The sprint goal might have multiple components. The sprint goal might be this formula car needs a pit stop. And we need to optimize that process. Now, that process requires a tire change, a refuel, some adjustment. It needs a lollipop person to make the entire process safe and communication be constrained. But that's part of the entire value stream, and it should be optimized. What do you think?
As you said that there was coming something like a meta context into my mind. So you have several small contexts of very specific tasks. Let's say
there are mini projects within the project, right? So there's this fractal element.
Let's assume a team of two, which is easy. So you have a front-end engineer and a back-end engineer, and the idea is you want to have an email field, text field with a submit button, and this should be saved into the database. Simple
yes.
thing. So like a subscribe button on my Substack, and you have two developers for that, and you go basically and say, okay, this is one mono task. So this is a task we shall deliver as a team. So you have two subtasks of creating the UI and maybe another subtask to create the API layer, which is actually sending the request to the server, and the server is taking that because of calls or something like that. You don't need authentication or something like that, and you take it. So you have basically 2 to 3 little components, one task, a team which is in a meta context. So if one developer is asking the other about his specific context, he doesn't need to switch context. He is still in the same world.
It's collaboration.
Yeah. It's not like, hey, you are actually working on the chat system, and you are on the subscription system. This is a context switch. This is basically multitasking at the same moment. So I would see it like this, actually, that you have actually some kind of overarching context, and as long as you are in this context, everything is fine, and everything, or you could name it monotasking. As soon as you have several of those meta tasks, which are maybe, or context, which are maybe even connected to other product owners or clients or something like that, you are definitely out of that.
Yeah, because it's the worst thing you can do is hand off things, where you can say, I'm monotasking on my subtask, and you're the worst monstrosity, and I've seen this, and I have to admit, I've also encouraged this when I was young and naive and following Git flow. We had exactly this setup, but we also needed a sysadmin for installing a new Redis server somewhere in the cloud, and product sign-off. So we had a branch for the front end, we had a branch for the back end, we had a branch for the system changes, then we had a merge branch to the system changes to be released in advance, then we had a feature branch that merged together the backend branch and the front-end branch, and then we reviewed that, and then that we branched together into a release candidate for that branch that depended on the Redis being deployed on the server. So if it took 6 commits for the 2 engineers to do, overall in this bloated process, it took about 20 artificial commits to actually push it out. So we worked 3-4 times needlessly, handing off things and handing back things for no reason. Because we could have just collaborated together on trunk. There's no reason to isolate, because isolation is not desired. What's desired is getting, failing fast. What's desired is, I am about to break something. How do I do this so it doesn't break? How do I make it backward compatible? If it's not backward compatible, how do I make it the least necessary pain for everybody else involved? And if possible, I need to pay that pain off now before I continue with this feature. And that's what continuous integration is about. It's about, oh, I'm about to do something backward incompatible. I need to start with that, stop the line. Everybody needs to help me with that. And then once we get to the pain, I can then be very productive on my feature. Rather than saying, oh, I'm going on my feature bench to isolate myself because it contains something painful. And then because it contains something painful, it gives this illusion that it's safe. And then it crams up a lot of features. And then the little painful thing will be hiding between all those features, because 2 months from now, the requirements will obviously change because it took too long to finish. So now the requirements have changed. The pain is no longer visible. It's no longer expected. And then when it goes out into the main branch, all hell breaks loose. And if you're chasing a tight deadline, now you're stressed out. You don't have time. If there's a quality problem, you don't have time to course correct it. And then what happens? Oh yeah, it's shit, but let's create a ticket for it and let's fix it after launch. And that's the problem. That's the waste. But it happens at the beginning. It happens at the beginning, saying, okay, what is the painful bit that isn't backward compatible? We need to start with that. If that is wrong, if that takes a long time, it needs to go on the roadmap. But we can't do it silently isolated on a branch.
True words.
That seems like a very natural point to stop on. Adrian, do you want to push anything? Your Substack, your website? How can
Yes,
people reach you?
if you like to read or listen about those things, go to my Substack, which is the Snackable CTO or Snackable CTO. It's basically just my experience there from the last 15 years of being CTO and tech lead, and I just openly write about that. I write about that on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, I'm always happy to have feedback of yours, just to have the idea of, do you agree, do you disagree? Because we all learn. So this is my message. We all learn. And
Yes.
I came into writing because I want to learn from others. I want to learn myself while I'm writing, and that we all can become better developers, better tech leads, better see something, just to create better products and contribute back to this great community of open source, all these blogs out there, podcasts out there. So see that as a great family of fellow developers. And this is what I see, what I want to contribute to. And yes, that's it, what I want to give today. And thank you very much for having me. That was a great stream, a great conversation, great questions so far.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time. Everybody in chat, thank you for joining us on this benevolent mission. Adrian, I love the way you phrased that, to better everybody, to serve everybody, to give back to the community. I'm now going to slowly close off the stream. There will be some elevator music with the Crafting Tech Teams banner sliding around in the bottom. If you want to subscribe to Crafting Tech Teams, that's the one that I'm running. Please feel free. There will be a recap of this on Tuesday. And we are starting a new book club next week in October on teams of teams. So generally how to split up a large team into smaller teams and how to create those monotasking units. We'll be joining a roundtable with other tech leads who will be adopting speed reading and reading the book and sharing their insights. So if you want to join, DM me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for coming today. Adrian, again, thank you for joining me. And see you next time.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.